Welcome to another edition of Inside Plano. I'm your host, Amanda McNew. Shauna is off today, but I am delighted to introduce our guest. We've got Deputy City Manager Sam Greif. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
Well, I invited you here to pretty much look back on your career because you are retiring very soon.
Yes, at the end of the month.
Are you excited?
I am very excited. I'm a little nervous, but excited at the same time.
You're not smiling at all.
No.
Well, tell us, so you've had a very incredible career, and I would love the audience to hear, how did you get started in public safety?
Been blessed, first and foremost. But I had a cousin who was an Arlington firefighter that I was really close with, and I would go visit him after I got my driver's license. I'd go hang out at the station with him and the guys, and I just saw how happy they were and how much they just seemed to enjoy what they were doing.
And candidly, all you needed was a high school to fall.
And I'm like, that's the job for me. And I wanted to ultimately be a fighter pilot. So I joined the Air Force on the delayed entry program, so I could go in and be a firefighter in the Air Force, and then work my way through college, and then transfer to officer school, and then ultimately, hopefully, become a fighter pilot. And as I was going through my physical process for the Air Force, they discovered, I wasn't trying to hide it, but I have pins in my shoulder from a car accident when I was 14. And so they classified me 4F and wouldn't let me join. So I was completely shattered, but that certainly then turned full force into I was going to be a firefighter. So went to EMT school right out of high school, got hired by the city of Fort Worth ambulance provider at that time. This was January of 1982, and did about 4 years. Went to paramedic school a year later, continued to work on the ambulance, and then was blessed to get hired by my hometown, Fort Worth, in 1985, and did my 30 years there. Retired as the assistant chief to come to Plano to be the fire chief, which was a dream job that I didn't even know I wanted, but was recruited by Carrie Little, who I used to work with in Fort Worth, to apply, and I'm certainly glad I did. And then 6.5 years into that, the opportunity to be the deputy city manager came up. And so for the last 4 years, I've been in a completely different role than I ever envisioned myself in, but I've had an enormous blessing and an opportunity to just do something completely different from what I had done for, at that time, 40 years of wearing a uniform, either as EMS or fire, prior to coming into the city manager and having to put a suit on. So it's been a fun ride. Hard to believe it's been as long as it has.
Well, let's go back a minute. So you said you had an accident when you were 14. Did the accident or the way you were helped by paramedics affect you or impact you at all?
No, I honestly can't say. I mean, I already had kind of knew that I wanted to do public service. And like I said, the firefighting was kind of an ends to a means to get into a jet. And when that didn't work out, I just poured all my energies into fire and EMS. And I love Johnny and Roy. For anybody that's in public safety, they kind of remember Emergency, the TV show. And, it just seemed like an exciting profession and something that was going to be different every day. And I like a challenge. I don't like just same rote things every day. So it was just an enjoyable profession. I've loved every minute of it. I mean, obviously you have bad days, but in totality, I tell everybody there's probably only 2 days I wouldn't have gone to work if I'd have known what the day was going to bring. One of them I wasn't even at work, but I Delta 191 crashed August 2nd of 1985, the day that I was hired by the Fort Worth Fire Department and knew that I would be starting my career. And I wound up taking my ex-wife to the hospital because she ran the emergency room and she got the alert. And so long story, I was told, hey, get on care flight, landed with the first round of patients, and the nurse on the care flight knew me well and said, hey, I need help, get on the bird. And so I went back to that scene, and that's a scene you don't want to really see or relive. And then I had a head-on collision when I was a young lieutenant in Fort Worth Fire, and that really altered the path of my career in a very positive way. But at the moment, it was very dark when it happened because it took me off the fire truck. I had to have some surgeries, and it was really a devastating accident for me on a personal level. So, but that's when I, one of my favorite Bible verses is Romans 8:28. And I paraphrase, but God works all things to the good. And that accident actually completely changed the course of my career. And I wouldn't be here today, I'm confident, had it not been for that accident.
So what specifically changed?
Because I had to go into a non-operations position, I actually, after the accident, as I was recovering, ultimately had to have surgery. I actually got promoted to the rank of captain in my hospital bed. And they had to put me somewhere because I was not allowed to go back to operations. My doctor wouldn't release me for 24 months. And by getting into that non-ops role and being around people that were more in the administrative wing of things, that motivated me. I felt very inadequate because all I had was a high school diploma that I barely earned. And so it motivated me to go to college and start doing professional development. And then one thing led to another. And I found out I kind of had an aptitude for the administrative side of the fire department. But I ultimately got to go back to the field in an operations capacity as a battalion chief. And so it was fun going back to my battalion I grew up in as a firefighter. And through all ranks, I always stayed in that one battalion, Battalion 4 in Fort Worth. And I got to go back and be a BC in that battalion prior to being elevated to assistant chief of ops. So it was well-rounded in every respect. Like I said, don't want to relive it, but everything happens for a reason.
Well, and it's good. I think of both police and fire, even dispatching to that sense as a family. Mm-hmm. And the motivation that you can get from an injury to get back to your family, to get back into that kind of shift, that does make a difference based on who you work with.
Absolutely. And what you find out is that when you're out there in the field, I mean, that's kind of I call it the sexy job. It's where the rubber meets the road, as we say, but you don't stay out there without all of the support behind you. And that's what I learned, is that it takes a whole team to support those men and women that are out there on the front lines. And so I've got a very profound appreciation for everything that has to happen behind the scenes so that you can be out there on that fire truck and do your job. So, and it is one big team, and we are one family at the end of the day.
I think a lot of people, when they think of fire service, they think of the fun. They typically think of, getting to ride on the truck, and being the hero and being the save the day kind of person. But you started out with learning the compassion side, which is very different. You still may be a hero in a sense, but it's really, you're seeing the impact on everybody else.
Yes. I mean, you have to understand that for most people, unless you're neighbors or something like that, their first interaction with a paramedic or a firefighter is probably one of the worst days of their life, or that of a loved one that they're experiencing and going through that journey with. So having to have compassion, I always tell people that when they say, well, it doesn't bother me when they've seen tragedy, human tragedy, I'm like, those people kind of scare me, because I don't think how anybody could ever get used to seeing human suffering. I mean, you deal with it and you have to compartmentalize it in such a way not to let it affect you to the point you can't do your job. But you also have to understand that you will have days or moments in your career you get saturated, and it's important that you actually talk that through with somebody, whether it's cohorts or whether it's actually a professional, to kind of level set and get back to where you can do the job effectively. But you don't ever want to lose your compassion. So
going forward a little bit, thinking about mental health and the importance of that in all of everyone, basically, especially for public safety. Talk about the new shifts and how that can actually be bettered by having 24/72 shift on mental health, because that is a significant break. And it's something that Plano was the first in Texas to do as an all-paid fire department.
Yeah, it's real important to get the downtime. And the reality is if, there are those departments that say, well, we'll do it 48 hours straight and then take 4 days off. The more time off that's never been an argument. The more time you have off, like I always tell people, if you give me a week in Hawaii, I'm going to be pretty good mentally. If you give me 2 weeks, I'm really going to be good. But if you tell me I have to work 10 days straight nonstop in order to earn that, then that's not applicable. It's just not going to work out. And the busier the department becomes, the harder it is to stay in the saddle for 48 continuous hours and be effective. I mean, that's why airline pilots have timeouts, doctors, everybody in critical professions, truck drivers are required to have timeouts to where you can't stay in the saddle for those long periods. So this is the sweet spot, being able to do your 24-hour shift, which is very traditional for firefighters. And we actually like that camaraderie of being a family, living together. I think that's one of the things that makes the job very attractive. But then being able to decompress and truly get, if you have a hard shift and you're getting hammered, that first day off is just kind of that day just to somewhat recover. And then you actually have 2 quality days before you have to come back and go to work again. So, it's still a 42-hour work week. So even with that elongated time off that we've gone to, when this is fully implemented, our men and women in the fire department will still be working 2.2 hours more than the traditional 40-hour work employee.
So this is something that really will forever be tied to your career here in Plano because it happened under your watch and you helped put that together. What does that mean for you?
It's gratifying, and I certainly was a proponent, but candidly, something like this doesn't happen. I mean, every fire chief probably thought he would love to institute a 24/72. When I first brought it up to Mark, instead of him like kicking me out of his office, which would happen in many cities around the country, he's like, tell me more. And then as I started sharing more and more of the data with him, and we started expanding and kind of co-researching together. And then we would just have a lot of ad hoc conversations, and one thing led to another. And one day kind of floated the balloon about, well, if the men and women of the department were willing to make some sacrifices financially to help us get there. And he's like, I'm listening, I'm all ears. And one thing just led to another, and it morphed into coming to life. But again, in many cities, it would not happen because the city manager would have shut me down. And even if the city manager would have been on board, the city council would have shut it down. And instead, everybody was all in on this. And obviously, it took a huge cooperative effort from the men and women of the department and working with that work group. So I think it was just it's the Plano way. It was all hands came together and made it happen. So it's gratifying for me. But I was one player in the process. So, it's not like it was I waved a wand and it was strictly my doing. But yeah, I mean, obviously I was at ground zero and pushed hard for it. And it will forever be something I'm grateful for them. Most people know me. My son's in the fire service. He's a lieutenant in Fort Worth Fire. He's coming up on 19 years. I would love for all firefighters to be able to have this schedule. In my heart of hearts, I'm never going to quit being a firefighter. That was my chosen profession for 40 consecutive years. So it's always going to be near and dear to my heart that the health and safety of the folks that do the job is paramount.
So talk about you retired after 30 years in Fort Worth. What was it that really made you come to Plano instead of just retiring and going to Hawaii all the time? What made you want to stay in it?
I think when you start doing a job, you immediately, it's kind of human nature to me to look at that next rank and that's above you. And so throughout my fire service career, I would, you hit one spot, you get comfortable, you really felt like, okay, I know what I'm doing now. And you kind of start looking at that next level up. And then in my case, I've been blessed with some great mentors that they didn't really give you the option. It was like they pushed you and pulled you at the same time to bring you up. I have a lifelong mentor, or not lifelong, but career-long mentor, Jim Tidwell, who in Fort Worth Fire was the assistant chief of the department when he retired. And he was very much someone who, he was not the easiest person to work for, but he was very loyal to you, and he stretched you, and he demanded excellence. He pushed you. And between him in that respect and some other great officers that I worked with, Hugo Esparza, who was ultimately the Plano fire chief, but he came from Fort Worth as well. He encouraged me on the educational side of stuff. So I've been pushed by some people, and then you start hitting the I believe button that maybe I could do it. And then Carrie Little came over and took me to lunch one day and said, you need to apply for this job. And I was like, they wouldn't want another Fort Worth guy. Not that there was anything wrong with the first Fort Worth guy, but as I always joke, Miss America doesn't come from the same state 2 years in a row. So the thought that they would hire another Fort Worth guy, because there was one individual, Chief Crawford, who was in between the two of us, but he was only here for 2 years. So I just kind of felt like that lightning wouldn't get struck twice, but she was persistent. I call it adorably annoying. And she continued to keep texting me and pushing me. So finally I thought, if for no other reason, I'll put in just so I can tell an old friend I did it, and really was not expecting it to culminate in me getting the offer. But so grateful that it worked out, because it's the apex of my career. And I had a great career prior to getting here. Plano has truly been the pinnacle of my career, being able to, it was such an honor to wear the uniform and be the fire chief, but it's been an equal honor to be the deputy city manager for the public safety group and be able to kind of be the advocate and the conduit for all of the public safety departments. So it's been a very joyful time here in Plano.
So how did you make the transition from fire to deputy city manager? Because you're giving up part of the fire in a sense when you do that.
Right. Well, I joke about this, but I handed Chief Biggerstaff the keys to the car, so to speak, and said, okay, there's no dents or dings on it while I'm handing it to you, so don't wreck it. But I was blessed to have a tremendous team. I mean, my goal when I got to Plano, I always said I wanted to build a command team so strong no one knew who the leader was. And in the 6 years that I was the chief, a little over 6, I would tell you that the last 2 years, pretty much our Monday morning executive team meetings started out with me looking at my 2 assistant chiefs and saying, tell me what good decisions I made last week, because they were handling the department. They were so good. And Jeff Moberly, Chris Biggerstaff, prior to, Jeff has been with me from almost day one. I recruited him in as the assistant to the fire chief and just watched the young man rise through the ranks and earn his way up. It made it very easy to me appoint him when the time came. But I also had Danny Burks as one of my assistant chiefs. And between the 3 of them, I could have gone on a 2-week sabbatical and came up with a plan for how to fail. And I still wouldn't have been able to have executed it with that team around me because they were just that good. But because they were so good, it was easy to turn those keys over and cut that line of demarcation. And I think coming through the ranks of my career, the first time I really experienced that is when I was a driver. For 5 years, I drove a ladder truck. And frankly, I was really good at it. But when you move over to that officer seat, you're not the driver anymore. And there's nothing that infuriates a driver more than for the officer to tell them how to handle their rig. So I had to learn to bite the inside of my lips. But you make that transition. So when I made the determination to come into the DCM position, mentally, I just told myself I'm shutting off that wall. It's not my department anymore. It's not mine to run. It's my job to help support it. I'm held accountable for the fire chief's actions, but at the end of the day, it's his department now. So I shut that door. I think Chief Biggerstaff would be the first to tell you that I've never tried to tell him what he needed to do after he took over the department. And he did change some stuff, and I expected that because it's his department. He should get to run it.
Well, and I think you're obviously received well because everybody loves you and you're spoken very highly of. But I've noticed, I've only been in Plano less than a year, and I've noticed that all of the executive team has people they count on and they trust. There is no, if I'm gone, something's going to fall apart. Everyone hires and trains with excellence to make sure that there are people in place. Mm-hmm. And I think that's pretty unique.
It is. I think succession planning is one of the hallmarks of Plano. If we have the talent internally, then we elevate it. I think, and we try to prepare to get people. Now, it doesn't always work out. Obviously, I came from the outside. You came from the outside. So we're not afraid to pull the trigger as an organization and go outside. We're not going to reach to put someone in a position, but I think we do an outstanding job of preparing people to take the next position. And I think, again, one of our innovations that we just recently did, again, Mark Israelson is a visionary. The ACM, the Assistant City Manager Program, where we're, bringing 2 people in, and for 2 years they're going to operate as assistant city managers and be involved in everything, have major projects to work on, and then they'll rotate out and 2 more will come in. And I think that shows the purposeful intent to grow and have people ready for the next level. And so, yeah, it's very admirable, I think, the way we do business across all departments.
Okay. So once you came to Plano, you're about to leave. Who's your favorite coworker?
Oh, no, you can't do that. Well, I guess if I was going to say who's my favorite coworker, it would have to be Mark. And I have nothing to gain. I'm not being a sycophant. I have nothing to gain by saying that. But Mark has just been such an inspirational leader. In the 10 years that I've been here, 8 of those 10 years, I was a direct report to Mark. When he was in the seat that I'm in now, I reported directly to him, and we just had a very strong bond. He cares about people in a way that it's just hard to grasp unless you've been on that receiving end. I don't want to get emotional, but when I was going through COVID, I was admitted in critical condition. I spent 17 days in MCP. I did not think I was coming out of that hospital. and it was devastating on me and my family. But I remember one of the first phone calls when I got out was from Mark asking, the day I got out, as a matter of fact, and got home, he said, I want to come see you next Tuesday. I got out on a Tuesday. He said, I want to come see you next Tuesday and have a quick cup of coffee. I remember telling my wife, he won't be here long, so she said, I'll get lost, go in another room. I said, oh, don't worry about it. He won't be here long. He's just checking in. He was there for over an hour. And I was emaciated. I had lost 17 pounds. I was at the lowest point mentally I've ever been. I'm sucking on an oxygen, nasal cannula like a very elderly person. And I had no idea how long it was going to take me to get my strength back. But what I remember is him looking at me and telling me, I want Sam back. And the department is being ran well. Take your time. I want Sam back, the whole package. And he continued to check on me routinely. There was never any pressure for me to get back. The only pressure on me was to truly mentally prepare myself to get back, physically, mentally, and he had my back the whole time. You don't forget that. So the chance to work day in and day out with him has been incredible. So you said coworkers, so I'm going to clarify that by saying, now if you just say like who's probably my bestie, that since I've been in Plano, we actually have not worked together all that long. I guess about 4.5 years, something like that, is LaShawn. Because LaShawn came to Plano, or I came to Plano, and she was my boss for that long, and then she retired. And but we actually struck up a very strong friendship after she left, and it's just morphed into she's family. Her family and my family are kind of blended together now, and so I would say she's my best friend in the city, but Mark's my best coworker. And I apologize to everybody else.
Who cares? You're leaving.
Yeah.
So if you have advice for anyone just starting their career in fire or public safety, what advice do you give them?
Make sure your heart's in it. This is what you really want to do. It's a tough job. It can be a fun job, and it is a gratifying feeling when people find out you're a firefighter. They see you in uniform, or you're wearing a T-shirt when you're off duty, and people thank you for your service. I'd be lying if I said it's a noble profession. And so if you're going to be fire, police, any 911, I was over the comms in Fort Worth Fire for many years. I don't care which job you're doing or supporting role in public safety. It's stressful. There's no question about it. It's very stressful. And so I would just say, make sure that you're mentally prepared and it's something you really want to get into. And because not every day is going to be TV show kind of stuff. The nitty gritty side of it, the sides that people don't talk about. And I don't want to gross anybody out by some of the negative side that you see. You see the worst in humanity. I think you have to really stay centered and understand that there's bad people out there that do bad things. And you wind up having to be, pulled into that environment. So I'd say just make sure your heart's in it and that you know what you're getting into, do your research. And then bloom where you're planted, because you're going to find that you're going to be given assignments. It's a paramilitary organization in both fire and police. And so you're going to be put into some positions that maybe you didn't ask for. But when you make the best of it, put your happy face on and try to make it better than you found it. I think if you do that, you wind up finding that it's actually quite enjoyable, and that you find value in every position that you get put into. And I also think that leads to you getting put into other, ultimately it comes around. You'll get some roses handed to you as well as thorns. So keep a positive attitude.
I think that's great. Okay, so I've got something fun. So you talked about LaShawn being one of your favorites. I knew that. You told me that on day one. And then Mark, and then obviously we've got Chief Biggerstaff as well. So I questioned all three of them to see which knows you best. Okay. So I'm going to ask you the same questions and we'll see how many and who got them right.
Okay.
What piece of fire gear would you say is most essential on a call?
Your helmet.
Okay, I laugh because you had a lot of radio guesses, but Chief Biggerstaff actually wrote helmet and then crossed it out thinking maybe that's not what you would say, but that was his first instinct. So I'll just say that. We'll give it to him. What word best describes your leadership style?
Situational.
What is your go-to phrase or some kind of saying that you're known for?
It's all about Mrs. Smith.
Do you want to guess which person got that right?
Mark Israelson.
LaShawn.
Oh, okay.
What time of day do you think is your most productive?
Probably 9 a.m.
Okay. You've got Chief Biggerstaff close on that one. Okay. What is the one thing you never leave your office without?
My phone.
Okay. We've got a tie on that one. You've got LaShawn and you've got Chris on that. What is your preferred way to unwind after a long day?
Well, obviously being with my wife and usually about a 2-finger bourbon.
Nobody would cop to that. That was my guess too. And nobody would say the bourbon.
Oh, well, what did they say?
LaShawn said dinner with your wife and a cocktail. So she was trying to protect.
Okay.
I think
So,
that counts.
Yeah, well,
And Mark said rosemary. And Chief Biggerstaff laughed and said he wasn't going to write down the real answer, but that he'll just say watch football. But he knew. All right. Coffee or tea?
coffee.
Okay. Favorite food?
Mexican.
What is your biggest pet peeve in meetings?
When there's nothing that gets accomplished coming out of them. In other words, I don't like meeting just to meet. And the other one, I guess, the pet peeve with people not saying what everybody's thinking, but it needs to be said, but they won't say it.
I agree with you there. All right. What would coworkers say you're most known for?
Being authentic, frank, blunt, whatever synonym you want to use.
Okay. What are you most looking forward to in retirement?
Oh, definitely just spending time with Rosemary and more time with my son and my grandkids, traveling, fishing, golfing, just leisure. Someone asked me the other day, what was I going to do? And I said, nothing, and I'm not starting that till 10 a.m.
It's perfect. All right. Then I asked them what they would miss most about you. So what do you think they would have said?
Part of me would say my humor, because I like to, I take the job seriously, but I don't take myself seriously, or my unvarnished way in which I articulate things.
Well, just so you know what they said, LaShawn said, your direct, genuine concern for people and your humor. Mark said he will miss you as a brother and confidant. And he did get very touched when he said that. And then Chief Biggerstaff said, just talking to you every day.
Well, and I will say ditto for all of them as well. And I'm not leaving Plano. We will remain in Plano. We will, like I said, travel more, but I'm not going anywhere. I'm going to be a Plano citizen and still be supportive of the job that everybody in the city of Plano does, because it's a remarkable place to live, as you know.
Yes. Okay. Is there anything else you'd like to say to our audience before we go? Just
that Plano has been truly a blessing to me in every respect. The citizens have been so supportive. I can remember my first couple of years here, it got to the point I was reluctant to go into a restaurant in uniform, because I'd go to pay my bill and somebody would say it's already been taken care of. And I'd be like, who did it? No one would own up to it. But that's the level of support that you receive in Plano. And so both internally with my coworkers, fellow department heads on the executive team, everyone is just supportive. We have the secret sauce in this city, and I think it's being proven as the news that has come out just this week, and other stories that have been in the news, that we're a city that's we're a grown city, mature city, whatever term you want to use, but usually that's really a way of saying that you're aging out. And it's just the opposite for us. We're in a redevelopment phase, and you don't redevelop to the level we're redeveloping unless your core services and everything about your city is so solid that it makes sense for people to come in and redevelop existing campuses and corporate headquarters. That doesn't happen by accident. That's strategic. And so I would tell our citizens, thank you for the support, and to continue to trust leadership. And I would ask leadership to never lose sight of the fact that we're here for Mr. and Mrs. Smith. And ultimately that's our job. And we have to do what we're supposed to do to take care of them.
Well, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.
I hope everyone enjoyed getting to know our Deputy City Manager, Sam Greif, one last time. We'll see you again soon. Thanks for joining us.